The blue light from 3 suns painted the crystal spires of Valara Prime in gentle hues. Elder Keth stood on the highest tower, watching his people move through the floating gardens with the grace their species had perfected over thousands of years. The Valerians had never known war. They had never needed to. Dr. Naya burst through the chamber doors, her delicate features twisted with panic. Her hands shook as she held the scanner, its readings flashing angry red warnings across the transparent. Display. Elder Keth, the long-range sensors have detected them. The Krex Empire, they're only 3 systems away. The ancient leader's pale blue skin grew even lighter. Stories of the Krex had reached them through fleeing refugees from distant worlds. Entire civilizations wiped out. Populations enslaved or simply eliminated. The Krex took what they wanted and destroyed what they couldn't use. How long do we have? Keth asked, his voice barely a whisper. 2 days, maybe 3. Their fleet is massive, hundreds of ships. Keth closed his eyes. The Valerian Defense Force consisted of 12 patrol ships designed for asteroid mining and rescue operations. Against the Krex war machine, they would last mere minutes. Send the beacon, he said finally. Broadcast on all frequencies. Someone in the galaxy must help us. Dr. Naya rushed to the communication array. Her fingers danced over the controls as she composed humanity's first contact with her species. She had no way of knowing that her desperate words would be misunderstood in the worst possible way. This is Dr. Naya of the Valerian Alliance. Our world faces destruction. Unknown hostile forces approach our system. We are a peaceful people with no defenses. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need immediate help. We have valuable scientific knowledge to offer in exchange for protection. Our coordinates are attached. Please hurry. The message shot out across space at faster-than-light speeds, reaching every major communication relay in the sector. 3 days later, massive energy signatures appeared at the edge of the Valerian system. Captain Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Thunderstrike, studying the alien world through the viewscreen. Behind his ship, 47 other vessels of the human battle fleet Prometheus maintained perfect formation. Destroyers, cruisers, and the massive dreadnought UES Retribution formed a wall of metal and weapons. "Sir, I'm not picking up any hostile forces," reported Lieutenant Hayes from the sensor station. "Just the alien ships on the planet." Torres frowned. The alien message had mentioned hostile forces and valuable knowledge. In human experience, that combination usually meant one thing: bait for a trap. Some species lured rescue ships into ambushes, then sold the captured vessels and crews to the highest bidder. "Keep weapons ready but not locked," Torres ordered. "Let's see what these aliens really want." On Valara Prime, Elder Keth received the news with a mixture of relief and confusion. Help had arrived, but the readings from their primitive sensors made no sense. 48 ships? He asked Dr. Naya. "Are you certain?" "The energy signatures are enormous. These ships are built for war, Elder. Heavy weapons, thick armor, everything designed for battle." Keth's confusion deepened. "But we asked for help. Not an invasion force. Perhaps they misunderstood our message?" Commander Reeves materialized on the main view screen as the humans established communication. His scarred face and military bearing made Keth take an involuntary step backward. This being looked like he had spent his entire life fighting. "This is Commander Reeves of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We received your transmission about hostile forces and valuable resources. State your intentions clearly." Keth tried to keep his voice steady. "Commander Reeves, I am Elder Keth of the Valerian people. We sent a distress call because our world is about to be attacked. We need protection, not interrogation." Reeves studied the alien leader. The creature looked fragile, almost transparent. Its huge eyes and delicate build suggested a species that had never seen real conflict. But appearances could be deceiving. Some of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy looked harmless. "You mentioned valuable knowledge in your transmission. What kind of knowledge?" Scientific research, cultural exchanges, anything you wish. We only want to survive." Before Reeves could respond, Lieutenant Hayes called out from behind him. "Sir, new contacts appearing on the edge of the system. Large fleet, unknown configuration." Torres felt his blood chill as the sensor data flowed across his screen. Over 200 ships, all built like floating fortresses. Their hulls showed scorch marks from recent battles, and weapon ports covered every surface. "Those are Krex ships," Dr. Naya whispered on the open channel. "They found us." The lead Krex vessel was a monster of black metal and red lights. High Pacifier Vex stood on its bridge, studying the unexpected human presence with growing interest. The Krex had conquered 47 star systems in the past century. They had faced many species, but never humans. "What are those ships?" Vex demanded of his tactical officer. "Unknown design, High Pacifier. Heavy weapons, advanced armor. They're protecting the Valerian world." Vex's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "So the sheep found guard dogs. No matter, we'll collect them both." Back on the human flagship, Commander Reeves made a decision that would change the course of the battle. He had seen enough war to recognize genuine fear when he encountered it. The Valerians weren't predators laying a trap. They were prey, desperate and terrified. All ships, battle stations. Protect the planet at all costs. Elder Keth watched the human fleet move with deadly precision. The ships spread out in a defensive formation around Valara Prime, their weapons coming online with lethal efficiency. For the first time in days, he felt something like hope. But the hope mixed with a growing unease. The humans moved like born killers. Their ships bristled with enough firepower to crack a moon. What kind of species needed such weapons? What kind? Of worlds had forged beings like Commander Reeves? Dr. Naya pulled up the deep space communication logs on her scanner. What she found made her hands tremble. References to humans appeared in dozens of alien databases, always with the same warnings. Deathworld species, apex predators, the beings from Sol who fight like demons. "Elder," she whispered, "I think we may have called for help from something more dangerous than the Krex." The first Krex scout ships entered the system, their sensors immediately locking onto the human fleet. Aboard the lead vessel, a young Krex warrior stared at his readings in disbelief. "War Commander, those ships, the weapon signatures match. The old warnings, the ones from the archives." His commander leaned forward. "What warnings?" "The Deathworld demons, sir. The humans from Sol. The legends say they turn war into an art form." The war commander laughed harshly. "Legends and children's stories. Ready all weapons." But as more human ships moved into position, each one built like a fortress and armed like a battleship, doubt began to creep into his mind. Perhaps some legends were based on truth. The stage was set. 3 species, each with their own understanding of survival, faced each other across the void. The Valerians, who had never known war, found themselves protected by beings who seemed to know nothing else. The Krex, confident in their superiority, prepared to face an enemy that defied every assumption they had made. Commander Reeves opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "Remember, people, these Valerians asked for help. We're going to give them exactly what they need. All ships, prepare for engagement." The battle for Valara Prime was about to begin, and none of the participants truly understood what they had gotten themselves into. Admiral Kane stood in the command center of the UES Retribution, watching data streams from across the Valerian system. As the senior human officer, the weight of first contact rested on his shoulders. He had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile aliens before, but never while protecting a species he barely understood. "Admiral, the Krex are moving," reported Captain Torres from his position at the tactical display. 12 ships breaking off from their main fleet. They're heading for the outer colonies. Kane studied the projection showing the enemy movement. The Krex ships moved with purpose, ignoring the human defensive line completely. They were going after easier targets. "They're testing us," Kane realized. seeing if we'll really protect the Valerians or just defend ourselves. On the bridge of his flagship, High Pacifier Vex watched the human response with growing interest. The unknown species had positioned themselves around the main world, but the outer settlements remained vulnerable. Perfect targets to measure their resolve. "Begin the harvest on Colony World 3, he ordered. "Standard procedures. Leave nothing alive." The Krex attack on Valerian Colony Beta 7 began without warning. The small settlement housed 2,000 civilians, mostly scientists and their families studying rare minerals. They had no weapons, no shields, and no way to fight back. Lieutenant Hayes monitored the colony's desperate transmissions from his post aboard the Thunderstrike. The young officer had joined the fleet to see the galaxy, not to witness mass murder. "Sir, the colony is sending emergency signals. The Krex they're not taking prisoners." Commander Reeves felt his jaw tighten. He had seen Krex tactics before, but always from intelligence reports. Watching it happen in real time made his stomach turn. "Admiral Kane, requesting permission to intercept." Kane's voice came through the comm system, heavy with controlled anger. "Granted. Take a squadron and show these bastards what happens when they hurt civilians." 4 human destroyers broke from the main defensive line, their engines blazing as they raced toward the outer colony. But they were already too late to save Beta 7. When the human ships arrived, they found only wreckage and bodies floating in space. The colony's biodomes had been shattered, their atmosphere venting into the void. 2,000 Valerians had died in less than an hour. Hayes stared at the destruction through his view screen, his hands clenched into fists. "How could they do this? They're not even at war with the Valerians." "Because they can," Reeves answered grimly. "The Krex don't see other species as people. We're all just resources to be harvested." The human squadron found the Krex raiders still in the area, loading Valerian technology onto their ships. When the human destroyers appeared, the Krex commander assumed they had come to negotiate. He was wrong. The human attack came without warning or mercy. Torpedo spreads tore through Krex shields while laser batteries carved up their armor. The raiders found themselves facing an enemy that fought with cold, calculated fury. In less than 10 minutes, 11 Krex ships became expanding clouds of debris. Only one escaped, and only because Commander Reeves allowed it. Someone had to carry word back to the main fleet. The surviving Krex captain raced back to High Pacifier Vex with news that chilled the entire crew. The humans didn't just fight, they destroyed with terrifying efficiency. No warnings, no demands for surrender, just immediate and overwhelming violence. "They move like predators," the captain reported, his voice shaking. "Perfect coordination, maximum firepower. They wanted us all dead." Vex studied the tactical recordings from the brief battle. The human ships moved with a precision that spoke of long experience in warfare. Their weapons struck with surgical accuracy, and their tactics showed no mercy for defeated enemies. On Valara Prime, Keeper Lith sat in the Great Archive, pulling up ancient records on her crystalline display. As the keeper of historical knowledge, she had access to information gathered from refugees across the galaxy. What she found about humans made her delicate features pale with fear. The records spoke of a species from a world called Earth, a planet, so dangerous that merely surviving there turned its inhabitants into living weapons. Stories of humans fighting impossible odds and winning through sheer determination. Tales of their armies conquering entire star systems through tactics so brutal that other species preferred surrender to facing them in battle. "They are called Deathworlders," she read aloud to Elder Keth. "Born on a world of predators and natural disasters. They know only violence and conquest." Keth watched through the chamber's transparent walls as human shuttles landed in the capital. The beings that emerged moved with confident strides, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Even in peaceful surroundings, they remained alert and ready for combat. "But they came to help us," Keth protested. "They're protecting our people." "Perhaps," Lith replied quietly. "Or perhaps they're protecting their new territory." Admiral Kane met with the Valerian leadership in the Crystal, spire that served as their government center. The human admiral tried to keep his posture non-threatening, but his scarred hands and military bearing made the aliens nervous. "We need to coordinate our defenses," Kane explained through the translation device. "The Krex will return with their full fleet. When they do, we'll need every advantage we can get." Dr. Naya spoke up from her position near the window. "Admiral, our people are grateful for your protection, but we must ask, what do you want in return?" Kane's expression softened. Slightly, it was a fair question. In his experience, no species helped others without expecting something back. "Right now, we want to keep you alive. After that, we can discuss trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. But first, we need to survive what's coming." Through the chamber's crystal walls, they could see the massive Krex fleet taking position at the edge of the system. Over 200 ships, each one designed for conquest and destruction. The sight made even the hardened human admiral pause. "They outnumber us 4-1, Kane admitted. "But we have advantages they don't expect." Keeper Lith leaned forward. "What advantages?" Kane's smile was cold and predatory. "We're humans. We've been outnumbered before." War Prime Thane materialized on the command deck of the Krex flagship via long-range hologram. The Supreme Krex commander had traveled from the Empire's core world specifically to oversee this conquest. The reports of human intervention had intrigued him. High Pacifier Vex explained these delays. One primitive world should have fallen by now. Vex struggled to keep his voice steady. "War Prime, we encountered unexpected resistance. The humans, they fight differently than other species." "Humans?" Thane's interest sharpened. "The species from the Deathworld? The ones mentioned in the old archive warnings?" I am not certain, War Prime. But their ships are formidable, and their tactics are unlike anything we have faced." Thane studied the tactical display showing the human defensive positions. Their formation looked solid, but not impossible to break. However, something about their positioning bothered him. It seemed too perfect, too much like they wanted the Krex to attack in a specific way. "Very well. Prepare the full assault. If these humans are truly the Deathworld demons from the legends, then conquering them will bring great honor to the Empire." Back aboard the Retribution, Admiral Kane watched the Krex fleet maneuver into attack formation. His tactical officers reported enemy numbers and weapons loadouts with professional calm, but Kane could sense their underlying tension. This would be the largest space battle humans had fought in over a decade. "Admiral," Captain Torres reported, "all ships are in position. The Valerians have evacuated their orbital stations as requested." Kane nodded. The human fleet hung in space around Valera Prime like a steel net, waiting for the Krex to make their move. But Kane had one more card to play, something the enemy couldn't possibly expect. "Communications, open a channel to all ships. It's time they knew what they're really facing." Throughout the human fleet, the Admiral's voice carried over secure. Channels. "People, we're about to fight an enemy that specializes in genocide. They've wiped out entire civilizations, enslaved billions, and they think we're just another species to be conquered. Time to show them the difference between predators and prey. Remember, we don't just fight to win. We fight to make sure our enemies never threaten innocent people again." The Krex fleet began its advance, confident in their overwhelming numbers. They had no way of knowing that they were about to discover why humans were feared across the galaxy. The real battle was about to begin. General Park stood in the war room aboard the UES Retribution, studying holographic displays that showed every moon, asteroid, and space station in the Valerian system. The grizzled veteran had fought ground campaigns on 17 different worlds, and he knew that space battles were only half the war. "Admiral Kane, I need permission to begin orbital bombardment of these positions," Park said, pointing to several asteroid clusters where Krex ships had taken cover. "If we let them establish forward bases, they'll use them to launch raids on civilian targets." Elder Keth, who had been invited to observe human tactical planning, felt his blood chill. Orbital bombardment? General, those asteroids contain mining stations. There may be survivors hiding there. Park's weathered face showed no emotion. Elder, war isn't clean. Every minute we delay gives the enemy time to dig in deeper. Better to lose a few mining stations than lose the entire planet. Dr. Naya stepped forward, her voice trembling with distress. General Park, please. We don't destroy things to save them. There must be another way. The human general turned to face the Valerian scientist directly. His pale blue eyes held the hardness of someone who had made impossible choices before. Doctor, your people called for help. This is what help looks like when you're fighting an enemy that wants to wipe you out completely. We can't save everyone, but we can save your species. Admiral Kane intervened before the argument could escalate. General, use precision strikes only. Target confirmed Krek's positions, but scan for life signs first. We're here to protect civilians, not eliminate them. Park nodded reluctantly. Understood, sir. But when this gets messy, and it will get messy, remember that hesitation kills more people than hard choices. In the crystal spires of Valara Prime, Wisdom Keeper Olin addressed an emergency session of the Valerian Council. The ancient leader had lived through 9 centuries of peace, and the human military methods horrified him more than the Krek's invasion. Honored colleagues, we must consider surrender, Olin declared, his voice carrying the weight of ages. These humans speak of destroying entire regions to achieve victory. How are they different from the Kreks? Keeper Lith stood to respond, her younger voice cutting through the chamber's crystal acoustics. Wisdom Keeper, I have studied the humans' previous conflicts. They fight with terrible efficiency, yes, but they also protect those who cannot protect themselves. The Kreks enslave or eliminate everyone they encounter. But at what cost? Olan demanded. Will we survive their protection only to find our world turned into a fortress? Will our children grow up learning their ways of war? The debate raged through the council chambers, while high above, human and Krek's fleets maneuvered for position like massive predators circling each other. Corporal Mitchell led his squad through the underground tunnels of Valerian Colony Gamma-12, helping evacuate civilians before the Krek's ground forces arrived. The young Marine had been shocked by his first sight of Valerian families, delicate beings with huge eyes and transparent skin, creatures that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale rather than a war zone. Easy there, little guy, Mitchell said softly to a Valerian child who had been separated from her family. The girl couldn't have been more than 5 years old, and she stared up at the armored human with wonder rather than fear. Are you going to hurt the bad people? She asked in broken standard, her voice like music. Mitchell knelt down to her level, his weapon still ready but his voice gentle. That's the plan, kid. But first, let's get you somewhere safe. As they moved through the tunnels, Mitchell's squad encountered their first Krek's patrol. The enemy soldiers were massive creatures, built like walking tanks with natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws. They had been herding Valerian civilians into capture nets. The firefight lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, 6 Krek soldiers lay dead, and Mitchell's squad had rescued 47 civilians. The Valerians stared at their rescuers with a mixture of gratitude and terror. How did you move so fast? Asked one of the adult Valerians. The Kreks were shooting at you, but you acted like you couldn't be hurt. Mitchell reloaded his weapon with practiced efficiency. Ma'am, on our world, everything tries to kill you from the day you're born. You learn to be hard to kill, or you don't survive long enough to leave the planet. War Prime Thane stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing unease. The human fleet had allowed his forces to advance into the inner system, but something felt wrong about their positioning. It was too easy, too much like they wanted the Kreks to move deeper into the trap. War Prime, reported his tactical officer. "The humans have begun bombardment of our forward positions, but their targeting is strange. They're avoiding areas where our prisoners might be held." Thane studied the bombardment patterns. The humans were using devastating firepower, but with surgical precision. They destroyed Krek's equipment and fortifications while leaving potential civilian shelter areas untouched. "They fight like they care about the primitives," Thane mused. "How unusual. Most species abandon their weaker allies when faced with superior force." His communications officer looked up from her station. "War Prime, we're receiving reports from our ground forces. The human soldiers, they're not fighting like normal beings. They move through our defensive positions like they cannot be stopped." Thane frowned. The Kreks had conquered 47 star systems. Their ground forces had never met an enemy they couldn't eventually overwhelm through superior numbers and firepower. "Show me the combat recordings." The holographic display flickered to life, showing helmet camera footage from Krek's soldiers engaged with human marines. Thane watched in growing amazement as human soldiers moved with impossible coordination, their weapons never seeming to miss. Their tactics adapted to every situation with deadly efficiency. In one clip, a single human squad eliminated an entire Krek's platoon by using the environment against them. In another, human soldiers fought through wounds that should have been fatal, driven by what could only be described as protective fury. "These are not normal beings," Thane whispered. "The old warnings were true. These are the Deathworld demons." Back on Valara Prime, Dr. Naya worked alongside human technicians to coordinate defensive systems. Despite her fear of their military methods, she found herself impressed by their technical knowledge and their genuine concern for Valarian safety. "Dr. Wells," she said to the human scientist working beside her, "your people fight so violently, but you also try so hard to protect us. I don't understand how both things can be true." Engineer Wells looked up from the shield generator she was repairing. "Doctor, my species evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to be violent because we had to be, but we also learned to protect our own, because survival meant working together. But we're not your own," Naya pointed out. "We're strangers who asked for help." Wells smiled, and for the first time, Naya saw warmth in a human expression. "Doctor, the moment you asked for protection from bullies, you became our responsibility. That's just how we're built." The main Krek's assault began at dawn, Valarian time. Over 150 ships launched simultaneous attacks on human defensive positions, their massive guns lighting up space with destructive energy. Admiral Kane watched the enemy advance from his command center, his expression calm despite the overwhelming odds. Around him, human officers called out targeting data and damage reports with professional efficiency. "Admiral," reported Captain Torres, "the Kreks are committing their entire fleet to the assault. They're not holding anything back." Kane nodded. This was exactly what he had hoped for. The Kreks were brave and confident, which made them predictable. They fought like they expected to win through superior force alone. "Execute battle plan, Omega," Kane ordered quietly. Throughout the human fleet, ships that had appeared to be badly damaged suddenly came back to life. Weapons that had seemed disabled opened fire with deadly accuracy. The entire system revealed itself to be one massive trap, with every asteroid, moon, and space station hiding concealed weapons and defensive systems. War Prime Thane watched his fleet walk into the most sophisticated ambush he had ever seen. The humans hadn't just prepared defenses, they had turned the entire star system into a weapon aimed at his forces. "All ships, withdraw immediately," he ordered, but it was too late. Human ships appeared from behind every large asteroid, their weapons already locked onto Krek's targets. The battle that followed would be remembered by both species for generations. The Kreks fought with the fury of a conquering empire that had never known defeat. The humans fought with the cold precision of predators protecting their territory. But as the casualties mounted and Krek's ships began to explode in brilliant fireballs, Thane realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were doing it while protecting every single Valerian life in the system. These weren't just soldiers, they were guardians, and they had turned the art of war into the science of protection. Captain Luna moved through the corridors of Valerian government complex like a shadow made deadly. Her special forces team had detected Krek's infiltrators 3 levels below the main council chambers, and they were moving toward the leaders who had trusted humans with their lives. The Kreks had used some kind of stealth technology to slip past the orbital defenses during the main battle. Now, 12 enemy commandos were hunting Elder Keth and the other Valerian leaders with orders to eliminate them before they could formally ally with the humans. Luna's team reached the lower levels just as the Kreks began their assault on the council chambers. Through her tactical display, she watched the enemy soldiers blast through crystal walls with heavy weapons, their massive forms moving with surprising speed through the delicate Valerian architecture. "Target the leaders. Leave no survivors," she heard the Krek's commander order through her translation device. Prime Elder Joran pressed himself against the crystal wall as Krek's soldiers poured into the council chamber. At over 800 years old, he was the senior leader of his people, and his death would throw the Valerian government into chaos at the worst possible moment. "Please," he whispered to the lead Krek's warrior. "We are not combatants. We seek only peace." The Krek's assault leader raised his weapon with cruel satisfaction. "Peace is what you'll have when you're dead, primitive." The shot never came. Captain Luna's team struck like lightning-made flesh. They appeared from ventilation shafts, emergency passages, and maintenance tunnels simultaneously. The Krek's soldiers, trained for warfare against civilized enemies, had never faced opponents who moved with such lethal grace. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 12 Krek's commandos lay dead, and not a single Valerian had been harmed. Prime Elder Joran stared at Captain Luna with wonder and terror as she checked her weapons with casual efficiency. "How?" he asked simply. Luna looked up from reloading her sidearm. "Sir, we've been fighting things that want to kill us since we learned to walk. These guys were good, but they weren't hunting us on our home ground." High above, the space battle reached its climax as Admiral Kane's tactical masterpiece unfolded in 3 dimensions. Human ships appeared from concealment behind asteroids and moons, their weapons already locked onto Krek's targets. The enemy fleet found itself caught in a crossfire that had been hours in the making. War Prime Thane watched his forces take devastating losses with growing horror. The humans didn't just fight with superior tactics, they fought with an understanding of warfare that went beyond anything the Kreks had encountered. "War Prime," his tactical officer reported. "We've lost 37 ships. The humans are targeting our command vessels specifically." Thane studied the battle display. The human attacks weren't random. They were systematically dismantling his fleet's command structure, turning his organized assault into a collection of isolated ships fighting for survival. "How do they know our tactical protocols so well?" he demanded. His intelligence officer looked up from her station with fear in her eyes. "War Prime, I believe they're predicting our responses. They seem to understand how we think." On the ground, Assault Marshal Zek led the main Krek's landing force against human defensive positions. The Krek's general had conquered 12 worlds personally, and he expected this battle to follow familiar patterns. The defenders would fight bravely, fall back to prepared positions, and eventually surrender when their losses became too heavy. Instead, he found himself facing an enemy that seemed to exist outside normal military logic. Human Marines didn't retreat when outnumbered. They adapted their tactics in real time, turning every piece of cover into a fortress and every bottleneck into a killing ground. When Krek's forces tried to overwhelm them with superior numbers, the humans simply fought harder. "General," reported one of his field commanders, "the human position on Hill 47 is supposed to be impossible to defend. They're outnumbered 10-1. But they're not giving ground." Zek studied the tactical display with growing unease. The humans had turned a simple defensive action into an art form. They moved like they could read his mind, anticipating every assault before he launched it. "They fight like they know they cannot lose," he muttered. His aide looked confused. "Sir?" "Nothing, Lieutenant. Order the reserve companies forward. We'll crush them with pure numbers." The reserve attack failed like all the others. Human soldiers seemed to multiply under pressure, their weapons never running out of ammunition, their determination never wavering. Zek watched an entire battalion break against a human defensive line held by 30 Marines. Dr. Wells worked frantically in the Valerian research facility, trying to integrate human and alien technology into something that could tip the balance of the battle. Around her, Valerian scientists watched in amazement as she solved technical problems that had puzzled them for years. "Dr. Wells," called Dr. Naya from across the laboratory, "the power coupling you designed is working perfectly. Our shield generators are operating at 140% normal capacity." Wells smiled grimly as she worked on the next modification. "Doctor, when your survival depends on making broken things work, you get very good at improvising solutions." The combined human-Valerian technical team had created something unprecedented, defensive systems that merged the best of both technologies. Valerian precision engineering enhanced human durability, while human adaptive thinking solved problems that Valerian logic couldn't crack. "Incoming!" called Lieutenant Hayes from the facility's command center. "Krek's bombers, heading straight. For us!" The modified defense grid came online just as the enemy attack reached them. Weapons that combined Valerian energy focusing with human targeting computers tore the Krek's bombers apart before they could release their payloads. Dr. Naya stared at the destruction displayed on her monitors. The integration worked better than we calculated. The combined systems are almost 3 times more effective than either technology alone. Wells nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Doctor, that's the thing about humans. We're really good at making things work together. It's how we survived long enough to leave our planet." In space, War Prime Thane made a decision born of desperation. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by enemies who seemed to anticipate his every move. Only one option remained: ram his flagship into the Valerian homeworld and detonate its main reactor. If he couldn't win the battle, he could at least eliminate the target. "All remaining ships, cover my approach," he ordered. "I will show these Deathworld demons that the Krek's empire does not surrender." Admiral Kane watched the enemy flagship change course toward Valara Prime with cold calculation. The Krek's commander was making his final play, and Kane had to admit it was tactically sound. One ship might get through the defensive grid where an entire fleet had failed. "All ships, intercept the Krek's flagship," Kane ordered. "Do not let it reach the planet." Captain Torres responded immediately from the Thunderstrike. "Admiral, we can intercept, but at current speed we'll need to ram them to stop them." Kane felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a familiar burden. The Krek's flagship was massive, heavily armored, and moving at ramming speed. Stopping it would require sacrifice. "Negative, Captain. All ships maintain current positions. I'll handle this personally." Kane turned to his crew on the Retribution's bridge. These people had followed him through a dozen campaigns, trusted him with their lives more times than he could count. "People, it's been an honor serving with you. Take care of the Valerians for me." Before anyone could protest, Kane engaged the Retribution's emergency override systems. The massive dreadnought's engines roared to life, pushing the ship toward an intercept course with the Krek's flagship. But as the two massive ships raced toward each other across the void, Dr. Wells' voice crackled over the comm system from the surface. "Admiral Kane, hold your course, but don't ram them yet. We've got one more trick to try. The combined human-Valerian technical team had been working on something unprecedented, a weapon system that could disable ships without destroying them. If it worked, they could stop the Krek's flagship without sacrificing the Retribution. If it didn't work, Admiral Kane was still prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect the innocent world below. The two flagships continued their deadly race toward collision, while on the planet's surface, human and Valerian scientists worked together to prove that sometimes the best weapons are the ones that don't kill. The massive Krek's flagship UKS Domination raced toward Valara Prime, with its reactor set to overload, while Admiral Kane's dreadnought UES Retribution closed the distance on an intercept course. In the research facility far below, Dr. Wells and Dr. Naya worked with desperate efficiency to complete their untested weapon system. "The power coupling is holding," Naya reported, her delicate hands dancing over crystalline controls. "But I'm not sure the targeting system can lock onto something moving that fast." Engineer Beck, a grizzled human technician, looked up from the makeshift weapon array. "Doc, the targeting computer doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough." Through the facility's transparent dome, they could see the two massive ships growing larger in the sky as they approached their collision point. The combined human-Valerian weapon represented their last hope of stopping the Krek's flagship without sacrificing Admiral Kane and his crew. "Charging sequence initiated," Wells announced. 30 seconds to firing solution. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Kane watched the distance counter tick down with professional calm. His crew worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency of people who had accepted their fate but refused to give up hope. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the Krek's ship is definitely set for reactor overload. If they reach the planet—" "They won't," Kane said simply. "One way or another, they won't." Captain Torres's voice crackled over the comm from the Thunderstrike. "Admiral, my ship can intercept them too. You don't have to do this alone." Kane smiled grimly. "Captain, stay in position. If this goes wrong, the fleet will need experienced commanders." War Prime Thane stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the human dreadnought approach with grudging respect. The enemy commander was willing to die to protect his allies. It was the kind of honor the Kreks could understand, even from their enemies. "So the Deathworld demons have honor after all," he muttered to his bridge crew. Perhaps the old stories were incomplete. His tactical officer looked up with confusion. "War Prime." "Nothing, Lieutenant. Maintain course. If we must die, at least we will take the humans' greatest ship with us." But as the two vessels closed to within moments of collision, Dr. Wells's voice echoed across every human ship in the system. "Firing. Now!" The combined weapon array on Valara Prime's surface discharged with a flash of pure energy that temporarily outshone the system's three suns. The beam struck the Krek's flagship with surgical precision, not to destroy it, but to disable its reactor safety systems and redirect the overload into space. Instead of exploding in a fireball that would have devastated the planet below, the UKS Domination simply went dark as its power systems shut down completely. The massive ship continued on its course toward Valara Prime, but now it was just a huge piece of metal instead of a weapon of mass destruction. Admiral Kane ordered emergency deceleration, his ship's engines screaming as they fought against momentum and gravity. The Retribution managed to avoid collision by less than 1,000 meters, so close that crew members on both ships could see each other through their viewports. "Well done, people," Kane announced to his crew and the entire human fleet. "Today, we learned something important. The best weapon isn't always the one that destroys." Young Tira, the Valerian child who had spoken with Corporal Mitchell during the evacuation, watched the sky battle from her family's shelter. When the explosions stopped and the shooting ended, she asked her mother the question that would define the relationship between their species for generations to come. "Mama, are the humans good people or bad people?" Her mother looked up at the sky, where human ships were already moving to help disabled Krex vessels instead of destroying them. Little one, I think they're both. But when they choose to be good, they're very, very good. War Prime Thane found himself a prisoner aboard the UES Retribution, sitting across from Admiral Kane in a clean, well-lit conference room. The human commander had treated him with respect despite their recent battle, something that puzzled the Krex leader. "Why didn't you destroy my ship when you had the chance?" Thane asked bluntly. Kane poured water from a pitcher and slid the glass across to his prisoner. "Because destroying enemies is easy. Creating peace is hard. Which do you think takes more strength?" Thane considered this while he studied the human admiral. Kane looked tired but satisfied, like a soldier who had accomplished his mission despite heavy costs. "My empire will not forget this defeat," Thane warned. "Other fleets will come." Kane's smile was predatory but not cruel. "War Prime, I hope. They do. Because when they arrive, they'll find something they've never seen before, a system defended by people who know how to work together." The aftermath of the battle transformed both the Valerian and human understanding of what alliance meant. Elder Keth stood before a joint assembly of Valerian leaders and human commanders, delivering a speech that would be remembered for centuries. 6 days ago, we sent a message asking for help. Keth began, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal chamber. "We expected rescue ships and medical supplies. Instead, we received something we didn't know we needed. Guardians." He gestured toward the human delegation, where Admiral Kane sat beside General Park and Captain Luna. "These beings came to us with weapons of war, but they used those weapons to protect the innocent. They showed us that sometimes peace can only be preserved by those willing to fight for it." Dr. Naya stood to address the assembly. "Through our cooperation, both species learned something valuable. Valerian science combined with human determination created solutions neither could achieve alone. We are stronger together than apart." Captain Torres, representing the human fleet commanders, rose to respond. "Speaking for the Human Colonial Defense Force, we're honored to call the Valerian people our allies. You asked for help, and we gave you what we could, our protection and our friendship." The formal alliance treaty was signed that afternoon, but the real bonds between the species had been forged in the fires of shared danger and mutual sacrifice. 6 months later, the Valerian system had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a true partnership between warrior and protector. Human defensive platforms orbited every major world, while Valerian research stations pushed the boundaries of science and technology. Corporal Mitchell, now promoted to sergeant, helped train Valerian volunteers in basic defensive tactics. His former student, the child Tira, had convinced her parents to let her attend the training sessions. "Sergeant Mitchell," she asked during a break in the lesson, "why do humans fight so much?" Mitchell knelt down to her level, his expression serious but kind. "Tira, we fight because some people hurt others just because they can. If good people don't stop the bad ones, more innocent people get hurt." "But fighting is scary," she pointed out. "Yes, it is. But protecting people you care about is worth being scared." Tira nodded solemnly, then brightened. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like humans." Mitchell smiled. "Kid, you already are. You just need to learn how to use it." In the research facilities, Dr. Wells and Dr. Naya continued their collaboration, developing technologies that merged human practicality with Valerian elegance. Their joint projects had produced defensive systems, medical advances, and exploration technologies that neither species could have created alone. "Naya," Wells said as they worked on their latest project, "do you still think we're too violent?" The Valerian scientist considered the question carefully. "Wells, I think violence itself is neither good nor evil. It depends on why you use it and what you're trying to protect." "And what do you think we're trying to protect?" Naya gestured toward the window, where human and Valerian children played together in the gardens below. The future. The idea that different people can work together instead of destroying each other. News of the alliance spread throughout the galaxy, carrying a message that resonated across countless worlds. The Valerians, who had never known war, had learned that sometimes peace required strength. The humans, who had always known war, had learned that strength was most beautiful when used to protect the innocent. When other Krex fleets approached Valerian space over the following months, they found something that stopped them cold: warning beacons broadcasting in every known language. This system is protected by the Human-Valerian Alliance. We seek peace with all civilized beings. However, those who threaten innocent life will face consequences. Choose wisely. Most Krex commanders chose to find easier targets. The few who didn't learn why humans were called Deathworld demons and why the Valerians were willing to call such dangerous allies their friends. Elder Keth stood once more in his crystal tower, but now he shared the space with Admiral Kane as they watched. Their peoples worked together below. The sight of human and Valerian children playing in the same gardens filled him with hope for the future. "Admiral," Keth said quietly, "when we first met, I was terrified of your people. I thought you would conquer us." Kane nodded. "I remember. You weren't wrong to be afraid. We are dangerous, but not to friends." "Never to friends," Kane agreed. "That's the thing about humans, Keth. We're loyal to the people who trust us with their safety. Sometimes that loyalty looks like violence to outsiders, but to us, it's just love with teeth." The irony of the situation was not lost on either leader. The Valerians had cried for help, and the Deathworlders had sent a war fleet. It had seemed like a mistake at first, but time had proven it to be exactly what both species needed. In the end, the galaxy learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most gentle souls need the fiercest guardians, and sometimes the fiercest guardians need gentle souls to remind them what they're fighting for. The alliance between Valara and humanity became a beacon of hope across the stars, proof that different species could not only coexist, but thrive together. They had discovered that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to fight and when to protect, and in the depths of space, other species took notice. Perhaps, they thought, it was time to reconsider what it meant to ask for help from the beings called humans.